Hello, I'm Dan Dal Degan, and welcome to another episode of Gray to Great. I'm joined today by Scott Colangelo, the chairman of Prime Capital. And we're delighted to have you, Scott. This will be a broadcast of some elements of a conversation you very generously shared with us at the RPAG Summit in Chicago this summer. So we're delighted to have you on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And maybe a great place to start is just that. I know one of the things you shared on stage with Rob and the team was your origin story, which is very engaging, and it's always insightful to our viewers who are plan advisors themselves to hear how their peers and the folks that they're inspired by, like you, got started. So can you share that story with us?
Yeah, and you're referencing starting in the industry, not my relationship with RPAG, correct?
Yes, that's exactly how you got started as a plan advisor, both wealth management, which we'll talk about later in the
Yeah.
context of convergence, and retirement planning.
No, it was. I started at Edward Jones. I was very lucky to start there. They had fantastic training. I think one of the things that maybe gets missed in this industry when you first start is really intense sales training, and that
Right.
they had exceptional sales training, where to the point where you're in a room with one person role playing on video camera over and over and over, and then you all get in a room and watch it together and poke fun at each other and have it's pretty interesting. I think my very first take, I knocked over a cup of coffee that was next to my hand because I'm always talking with my hands. So, but no, Edward Jones was a great place to start. So I started there, spent a couple of years growing my book, and was lucky enough to my first couple of years qualify for a thing called Pace Setters, which was their top 50 producers in the country. Me and another individual, Tim Hakes, who was my partner at Prime Capital. And as we were growing, one of the things I had been reading about was sort of this transition to fee-based asset management. Because when I started, it was like 7% mutual fund commissions and bond commissions and things like that. And I knew it never just felt right. You know what I mean? Like it was just wasn't, I felt like a fee-based model made more sense. And so we go to this Pace Setters Award thing. You spend a weekend with the chairman of Edward Jones. And I remember raising my hand. Tim and I are like in our late 20s, and everyone in the room's like they're, probably late 50s, early 60s. And we were lucky to have a lot of success early. And they, I remember raising my hand, and the chairman's sitting up in front of everyone, and we're kind of out there in these folding chairs. And he's sitting in like a, like Louis V chair, you know what I mean? And I raised my hand. I was like,
On the throne.
yeah, the throne. That's actually what it felt like. It was like this big red plush chair, and we had folding chairs, like 50 of them. And I was just like, what? And I'm not picking on them. They were a fantastic company. It was just kind of a funny scene. But I said, when I raised my hand, he's like, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Scott." And I said, "I'm just curious as to if we're going, if Edward Jones is going to open a second sort of vertical of business and start to offer fee-based services." And he said, "I'm sorry, but," he goes, I just can't imagine a world where anyone will pay a fee in a down market." And it struck me as, wow. I don't know why, it just did. And, I was young, but I kind of felt like, hey, if the balances go down, I make less. And if the balances go up, I make more. And I'm not charging them a big commission. And if they lose money, I win, and, that type of thing. So I remember I leaned over to Tim and I said, "We got to get out of here." And true story, right? Well, right when he answered that question. And we did. We looked for a place, we left, and we filed and set up the first RIA in the state of Kansas and worked with the Kansas Securities Department. They had never set one up, and they were great to work with. It was a collaboration because they didn't know, we didn't know. And, we sort of plagiarized some contracts from other RIAs that were bigger out in the East Coast and stuff, and, learned from them. And so did the state. And we worked together. And about 6 months later, launched the first RIA in Kansas. And that was the beginning of who we are today.
As a seminal moment, the answer to that question, which does in fact frame a turning point in the industry as well.
It does. Yeah.
Yes.
It was
So,
99. Yeah. So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Late 90s. Right. A lot was
Yep.
changing then. And so as you embarked on your own journey with your partner, Scott, and you think forward to probably questions you've gotten from others in the RA business, other retirement plan advisors who have looked to build their own practice. What did that experience teach you about what are the most important things to get right?
Yeah. Keep scale in mind early. I think we did. And, I don't know why. I remember, I wouldn't say I learned a ton in college. I think the things that caught my eye, stuck in my brain. And I always remember thinking about sort of the airline industry, the telephone industry, and how they how they built for scale and how that led to massive consolidation, and that's the ones that knew how to scale better really succeeded and ended up being the winners. And I don't know why that stood in my mind, but I remember thinking back then and talking to Tim, like, boy, portfolio management you're managing a set of risk-based portfolios, which is what we did, which is pretty basic when we started. We had 5 risk-based portfolios, was something very easy to scale. And because it was limited, you knew inside and out the holdings of those portfolios, why we were buying them, why we were allocating to them. So you could say, well, it's somewhat cookie cutter. And if I'm being honest, it was, it was somewhat cookie cutter. But back then we were pairing fee-based and sort of cookie cutter risk-based as sort of what we call the core portfolios. And then we would use other vehicles as sort of we'd call them satellites. And sort of, so one client may be aggressive. So maybe we had 70% in our aggressive portfolio, then 30% went to other types of assets that maybe weren't fee-based at the time. Now all of our portfolios are fee-based, and now we manage over 30 different strategies. But back then it was really, if I'm being honest, the initial thing we thought about was, let's build this right for scale, because we assumed we were going to have similar success that we did at Edward Jones. And we wanted to make sure that we could sort of rinse, repeat, and not allow our service level to go down. If you try to be all things to all people, that minutia creates an environment where you can't provide good service. And so that was probably one of the single things that we kept in our mind when we started.
Fascinating. So on that, both the necessity to not get spread too thinly so that you can really engage at a meaningful level of depth with each client, and then growing your firm and finding the talent to scale. How did you manage that?
I always start with trust. I know it sounds silly, but as we grew the firm, I've always believed that, the best companies have an uncanny level of trust within their troops, their team. I grew up in sports, and it's I've been on winning teams and losing teams, and you're on losing teams and your guys stick together. That's actually more gratifying than, you have a talented people group and you win. And so we really focused on bringing in people that we knew and we trusted from the business to start. Of course, they were talented. And back then we were really looking for salespeople because we were trying to grow the company, and candidly, no one was doing what we were doing. Like, we were the first RIA in Kansas. So, and all of a sudden we look at, we're going, oh my gosh, we got $300 million in management. And at the time that was a ton, and
the first RIA literally in the whole state.
At the time, we were the first one in the state. So when we filed it, so it was crazy. And all of a sudden it's like, boy, this is working. And so and since we had scale and we were managing the portfolios, just 5 of them, it's not like we had to build a 25-person investment team at the time like we have now. You know what I mean? So it was really more focused on, let's get great asset allocation. Our original approach, if I'm being really honest, is sort of mirror the Morningstar risk-based indexes, and then just find the best fund in every category. If we're competing against risk-based portfolios or other portfolios, they were all proprietary at the time. So it would be all one fund company, all one fund company, all one fund company. And I use American Funds as an example. One of the best equity managers of all time. I've yet to see one of their bond funds I would sell. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not their strength, and they don't put the resources there. And they don't, that's just an average thing, small cap, other things. And so, but man, you want large cap, they're the best, right? And so we just felt like, let's just follow the index that all these portfolios are tracking to, and then just get the best fund in every category. And I believed that over time we should outperform them, and we did. And so it wasn't overly complicated. So early on, we were looking for high quality salespeople that we trusted, that were team players. It wasn't complicated,
That's great. And you shared some stories meeting in Chicago around the career trajectory of some of those folks who've been with you for a long time.
Yeah.
Have any of them followed your lead and gone off and started their own firms as well?
We've had a couple. Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple that I don't know if I should use names. They're great friends, good friends to this day, that have started. I'll use a couple of names: Marco Ungushik, Ryan Rink. They were with us, and they wanted to peel off and start their own firm, which we respected, and they did it the right way. They came to us. They didn't slide a note over the door and leave in the middle of the night.
It had to feel a little nostalgic for you.
Yeah, they had integrity, and it was great. And they started a great firm, and they're running a great firm to this day called Two West Advisors, and they do a lot of work with retirement plans. So yeah, we've definitely, listen, you never want to hold anyone back.
Right.
I mean, if you really care about them, like everyone says, you have a great culture, you encourage that entrepreneurial mindset. You keep friendships alive. You don't take it personal. It's not personal. I mean, I started a company. Why should I begrudge them for wanting to start their own
That's why I
company?
love that story that you shared, because to me, that's the
Yeah,
ultimate expression of generosity and gratitude, is
yeah,
giving other people that opportunity and seeing them flourish. It's a bit like seeing your kids go off to college and that feeling of
yeah,
pride.
yeah.
Yes.
So
So now, given your career arc, you've also been in a unique position to see what's being described as this convergence between wealth management and retirement advising,
yeah,
because you've operated in both worlds. Can you comment on that?
yeah. I think it's a complicated topic, right? So we started doing fee-based management for wealth in the late '99, early 2000. I then got really fascinated with the retirement plan space and how nobody was working with participants. And so I started Qualified Plan Advisors as sort of a sub brand, and Tim Hakes ran Wealth. So he took Wealth, it was his baby, and he built it. He did a fantastic job. And I really focused on the retirement side. And I did it by just working with plan sponsors. And we started working with the participants, and the plan sponsors, like, boy, they don't get any attention. I mean, like, there was nobody talking about education and wellness back in the early 2000s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I built that vertical. He built that vertical. One of the unique things, Dan, was that we started doing managed portfolios and retirement plans back in like '03, '04. Okay. So that was like super innovative back then. We were managing risk-based portfolios, charging a fee. Back then, we were charging 1%. I mean, it sounds egregious today. Nobody was doing it at the time. And it was a lot of manual work back then. We didn't have the technology we had today. But plan sponsors loved it. Participants loved it. So you're going to do it for me? You know what I mean? And so what happened was we took the same 5 risk-based portfolios, and we had our investment advisory manage those for both retirement and wealth. So culturally, both verticals grew over 20 years together with the same investment philosophy, with the same investment leadership. So for us, this whole idea of convergence has been, I hate to say this, but it's really simple. And utilization of managed accounts has been really simple for us. You look at our competitors and they have 2, 3, 4% utilization of managed accounts, and we have over 45%. And they say to us, oh, well, you default. I'm like, no, we don't. We're not defaulting people. We're going out and actually doing the work and meeting with participants where they were and taking them through risk profiles. And if you take them through risk profiling, participants tend to go, they want the one that matches their risk profile. This is not an illogical thought process, right?
Right.
Um, and we say that, listen, target date funds are way better than you managing on your own, and they're less expensive than us doing it, but they're just going to be based on time. If you want portfolios based on your time, your risk tolerance, your investment experience, all that, then these are going to be better, and they're going to be more expensive. We're very open about it. You're going to pay a little more to get more. You know what I mean? And so that's been our approach on that side. On the convergence side, then what we do, our model has always been the individuals that provide the education to one location are the same individuals over and over and over. So think about it. We've taken them through risk profiling. We've helped them save the right amount. They see our faces over and over. So magically, when they retire, who do they call? This is not like a massive leap, a mental leap here. And so what the industry is doing is, hey, you're a retirement shop. I'm going to take private equity money. I'm going to buy a bunch of wealth advisors, duct tape them together, and we're going to be able to converge these rollovers. And it hasn't happened. And there's some very big names, even as of late, that have had to be sold because it didn't work. And the private equity companies didn't get the return that they were promised. And so the reality is that this convergence thing is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think it's being done the wrong way. I do think that you can do it in a manner where you can grow your organization, stay young as an organization from an advisor standpoint, and have this convergence thing sort of solve itself, which we can talk about later if you prefer or whatever. So
That's fascinating. And do you find that one of the challenges that those examples you describe of private equity firms that are not getting the outcomes they expected
yeah.
by merging several of these instances together is one of the gaps that they're just not getting people cross-trained in that duality of being able to speak both vocabularies and use that consultative approach you're describing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's more of a retirement practice purchase challenge than a wealth side. I think wealth side, you can merge these companies and get scale and everyone can win type of thing. When you buy retirement and think you're going to buy sort of education and participant wellness and all that because you bought a wealth firm, those wealth people haven't gone out and done, thousands of participant meetings, and they don't understand the language. I mean, like a typical I say language. A typical one, the most common one I've ever seen. I've probably done more meetings than anyone in my firm, other than maybe an individual named Chris Roper. But you go out there and they tell you that they can't afford it. That's why they don't participate. And then when you walk them through the risk profile and they realize you're going to manage the money, magically now they can afford it. You know why they don't participate? Because they're afraid of the investments. That's 85% of the people that said they couldn't afford it. When they realize we're going to manage it for them, they're like, okay. And they make really good investment decisions. And then and participation decisions, and the amount they save, they tend to save more when they realize someone is. So it's hard to culturally teach a bunch of RIAs that are used to working with wealthy people how you're going to bridge that gap in that language and understanding the typical fears and concerns. So I do think from the wealth side, you could buy a bunch of wealth firms, roll them up, and still have good culture and have good scale and stuff like that. I think it's very different when you buy a retirement shop and you're trying to buy firms to kind of attach to them and make that your education and wellness solution. I haven't seen that work yet.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a different going the other direction. Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit. Talk to us about your advocacy on Capitol Hill. Certainly this industry benefits from having an experienced voice like yours. What issues have you focused on?
You know, if I'm being very honest, my first 25 years plus, I didn't give much back to the industry. I just had my head down building our organization. And over the last couple of years, I've recognized the amount of work that people like Brian Graff from the American, ARA, and you see individuals like Renee Scherzer, Jania Stout, all these people giving their time, Nevin Adams, to make the industry better. And I didn't. I'm just being very honest. In the last couple of years, I've been like, I got to get more involved. I've made an effort to. And then out of that, some relationships developed with like Brian Graff and others like, hey, we'd like you to be more involved. And so I'm trying to do more. And over the last, just even the last year, like the push to get, collective trusts and 403Bs and has been something that I've been trying to help a great deal with some of the senators and some of the relationships I've been able to build there. And some through Brian Graff introductions, some through introductions of other people from DC that I know. And then on the other side, been getting involved as of late in the state of Kansas, trying to help them solve sort of this deficit that they have in their retirement plan and showing them, easy paths to fix it. Because Kansas isn't the only state that's massively underfunded in their pension plans. This is sort of a critical, very, very destructive topic that's not being addressed in the states around the country that needs to be addressed. And so I want to give back. For Kansas, I grew, my family raised my kids there, great schools, great police, safe roads. Like, you want to give back, right? These people made your lives better. And so I want them to have the best retirement they can. So I've been trying to advocate there and also on Capitol Hill and helping the ARA as much as I can.
It's a generous and impactful way of giving back after, at this stage of your career. So for somebody that is that person you were, like you said, 25 years ago, before you were getting involved legislatively, what should the people listening, our audience here who are plan advisors or earlier in their careers, what should they think about? Why are topics like the 403B policy changes important to them now?
Yeah, it's about being important to the end user, the constituent, the participant, the employee. Fundamentally, why is it that in a 401k plan, because of some sort of obsolete tax code, they can get collective trusts, and then you have and the 403Bs have to use mutual funds, and it's the same exact fund. It could be XYZ large cap growth fund, XYZ large cap growth CIT. They're the same fund, the same stocks, and the same percentage traded on the same day. It's exactly the same portfolio. The difference is the collective trust might be literally 2/3 cheaper than the mutual fund, because mutual funds, they don't know if the ticker symbol of the mutual fund is in a taxable account or a 401k. So they have to do sort of like tax accounting on every single investor, and it makes it far more expensive. Collective trusts were built to be omnibus pools of money. And so there's really none of that accounting that has to be done, because the collective trust company and the OCC recognizes the record keepers do all that. So there's no need for the mutual fund company to do all that. So right now it's being done twice. If you have a mutual fund inside a plan and there's a collective trust version, every time it's cheaper, and I've never seen one that isn't. And it's going to perform better because it's the same pool of money with less expense, right? So
it's a helpful explanation for those of us who don't live in that world or understand the nuances of those instruments like you described. So for that audience as well, the younger plan advisors who are listening to these conversations, what advice would you have? And let's use a time machine. Let's say, Scott, you're
Sure.
going back to talk to a young Scott Colangelo who's just at that stage of your career where you're moving from Edward Jones into your own firm with your business partner. What advice would you have for him?
I mean, the single most important advice, especially if you're a male, is do not put off addressing your hair loss as long as I did. So that is the one thing I would definitely get in front of. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
So,
thank you. I appreciate that too, as you can tell.
you know, first of all, find your lane that you enjoy. Like, I mean, listen, like for me, I fell in love with retirement because I was like, wow, I'm having a real impact on people's lives. And I work with wealthy individuals, but I don't have any delusion that I'm making their lives markedly better. I might, my approach with wealthy individuals has always been anything I can do to save them time. And then I feel like I'm adding value. But if I get them a 1/4%, 0.5% more return than another person, they're going to still be wealthy. You know what I mean? And I always felt like on the retirement side and with participants that I was really changing their lives. I really did. Like you walk in there and you're like, I remember my first retirement plan ever, there was like 29% participation, an average savings rate of under 3. And I went out there for 2.5 weeks, met with over 200 people individually and some small groups, but ended up leaving and having over 80% participation. And the average savings rate was like 8.1. And I to this day, I know that I changed a lot of those people's lives. If they just made no changes, they would have ended up with many, many times more money than the path they were on. And some of them weren't going to have any money saved. So find your lane. What is that passion? What do you enjoy? Because then every day, even if you're struggling, because Dan, in this industry, I mean, I woke up and looked in the mirror 100 times, like, wow, am I cut out for this? You get your teeth kicked in. You're like,
Yes, when you're going through the imposter syndrome.
yeah,
Yes,
I still have it. It's
of
like,
course.
so yeah. So no, it's difficult. I would say find your lane. And I mean, when you're young, this is just me. I mean, people won't believe me. It's fine. I would go in the office at, typically 6:30 or 7 in the morning. I'd work till, about 6, maybe, whatever. I'd go home, spend time with my wife, young child, and then they'd go to bed. I'd go back to the office for 4 hours. I'd go back, like 10 to 2 every night almost. Go back, sleep for 4 or 5 hours and go to work. It didn't kill me. And I felt like over the course of my, I added it up. I was working about 45% more than everyone else. And that time helped me immensely. My career took off very quickly, as did Tim Hakes. He didn't work the hours I did. He was just a better salesperson than I was. So yeah, for me, that's what it worked. I was a grinder and worked really, really hard. And I just felt like getting a space where you really enjoyed it and you're excited to work. So.
Well, there's no substitute for the passion. And it sounds like that led you to, given that math, you probably packed 10 years of experience into your first 5 years in the business.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
Love it. Well, thank you, Scott, for generously sharing that. We're gonna leave this there because that's a great punctuation for this discussion. We appreciate your time. We'd love to have you back on another episode of Gray to Great. Everybody, please join us again where we'll have another industry leader sharing their experiences as Scott just did. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Dan.